All right, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Tonight I am joined with Coach Andy and Coach Jimmy. Excited about the conversation we have for you all. So, Jimmy, Andy, how are we doing tonight?
Doing well, Ben. How we doing?
Doing good, doing good. Excited for this conversation. I know we've talked a little bit offline about it, so excited to share this information with everybody else. So tonight we are talking about a common bro science myth, and that is cardio kills gains, something that we've probably all heard multiple times in our life. But tonight we're going to talk about why that's not necessarily true. So Jimmy, Andy, how many guys are you training right now where you have no cardio or no aerobic work put into their program?
Zero.
So,
Unless they physically can't, unless they're injured and can't do cardio. But even at that, we would still do some sort of, let's say they have a lower body injury, we're probably still going to do battle ropes or skier or something like that. But no.
I got a guy who's got a lower body injury and he's still doing the upper body bike. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we'd always see with guys in football, the lower body injury. We had that, I forget what the machine's called, but where they can sit there and just pedal with their arms. You know what I'm talking about?
Upper body arm ergometer.
Yeah, that's it. So still extremely important to be able to get that heart rate elevated. So when you guys look at your programming with your guys, what are some of those main reasons we want to make sure that we are getting, those aerobic days in there? Obviously, everyone's goals can be a little different, but what are those main reasons we want that solid aerobic base when you guys look to program?
Real quick, before we get into that, I'm going to sympathize with everybody out there who is not doing cardio, because I was one of those people as well. Just lift as much as possible, as frequently as possible, trying to put on as much weight as possible, whether it was eating fast food or just stuffing calories in my face just to get it down. So I get it. But the longer I do this, now training more, again, I still want to train for performance, but also longevity. So really, with conditioning, it will help with longevity. It'll help you recover from your strength sessions as well as just overall fatigue. It'll help with that because if you can lower your resting heart rate, that means your heart is more efficient at pumping oxygen to the rest of your body. So those are some of the main reasons: is recoverability and just overall longevity. So if we want to continue doing what we're doing, which is training, we have to have some sort of conditioning in the plan. And it doesn't have to be ridiculous mileage per week, especially if your goal is strength and size. It doesn't have to be that. You don't have to be out running 30 miles a week, but you should have some baseline of aerobic fitness in your plan. And then we'll get further into the weeds of what that could look like, but I'll let Andy hop in on that as well.
Yeah, just to get a little bit more specific about what Jimmy is saying, how much is too much, basically, or how little is too little. Basically, your minimum standard should be 150 minutes of zone 2 cardio. For those people who don't know what zone 2 cardio is, you have 5 heart rate zones. Your heart rate, percentage of your heart rate max, 50 to 60, that's zone 1. Percentage of your heart rate max, 60% to 70%, that's zone 2. In zone 2, you should be able to have a conversation with a buddy and it not be belabored. You need 150 minutes of that a week. So, I tell people it's really easy to get that. I can throw on a weight vest and go and mow my lawn. I rack up 45 minutes just doing that. So it's not hard. You can get it.
Yeah, I believe you said last week you tend to read a book too if you're doing zone 2 on the treadmill.
Last week I read a book on the treadmill. I set the incline up to 20%, and I could go 2 miles an hour, so I could slowly read. And yeah,
I felt like a real piece of shit when I was doing mine on Saturday morning. I was just watching Netflix.
It's okay.
And I remember that you were bettering yourself reading a book because I'm watching the new Untold on Netflix.
Gladiator too, so okay.
Yeah, that can be motivation.
Yeah, don't kid yourself, Ben. Andy does a lot of Netflix watching when he's doing That was probably the first time in a while I'm sure he's reading a book. But that's pretty athletic if you can read a book while walking. I've never been able to do that. My concentration is tough enough to read stationary. it would throw me for a loop if I'm walking and reading. So impressive.
Yeah, I think I'd struggle with that. Maybe it's like, they make all those jokes about LeBron always reading a book, but he seems to always be on the first page with every time he's videoed reading a book walking in.
Yeah.
Is that it, Andy?
No, it's more like it's doable if you have the book on audio and you have
Yes.
it in front of you. So then you can actually do both.
Yeah, I can see that. Because I would struggle, like you said, Jimmy, of eyes moving, and then actually following along and then really retaining it at that point. Yeah, I can see that with the audiobook.
And just going back to what that 150 minutes could look like over a week. Again, if you're not putting any minutes in, so if you're the typical guy like just lifting and not doing any conditioning, doesn't mean right out of the gates you got to hit 150 minutes a week, but you want to slowly build to that. But so let's say you're lifting, I always talk about the 3-day total body split. Most of the people I train lift on 3-day splits, total body, because that's part of my belief system. So if we lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday could be your conditioning days. And if you're not specifically training for like a run improvement or something like that, to Andy's point, you can do zone 2 those days. And let's say you're trying to get 90 minutes a week, just do 3 30-minute sessions and then slowly build from there, get to that 150 minutes and just kind of, I always mention that cruising altitude, but it makes the most sense to me is like, all right, I'm not trying to build to 400 minutes a week just because most people don't have the time to do that. So yeah, build your cruising altitude up to 150 minutes. And then from there, let's say goals change and you want to implement some like higher interval type work, you could then do that as well. So, but again, the modality doesn't necessarily matter. It could be walking on a treadmill, to Andy's point. It could be mowing your lawn. It could be, I'm a big fan of weighted vest walks, just like Andy. I'm a fan of weighted vest stair stepper workouts. Just mixed modality conditioning as well. I like rotating almost like strongman style conditioning and just setting a clock for a half hour to 45 minutes of like manual labor type work and just keeping myself moving. I'm not redlining at any point. I'm just constantly moving from piece of equipment to piece of equipment. So you can get creative with it and break up the monotony. You could also mix up your pieces of equipment too, because I know 30 minutes on any piece of equipment is sometimes daunting for people. So you could go 10 minutes of incline walk, 10 minutes jog, 10 minutes rower, or any combination you want. You can get creative with it.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger listening to a DeFranco podcast, and he was talking about, doing cardio outside of just the traditional running, elliptical, whatever else. And he talked about these yard work sessions he would do. And he phrased it in the sense of like, think about doing yard work. Whenever you do yard work, you've sweated through your shirt, your heart rate's elevated. So he was talking about doing these sessions where it was essentially kind of like strongman work. You'd pick up some kettlebells, you'd carry them a distance, maybe you bear hugged a sandbag, and you were just kind of doing these sort of random movements for that 15, 20 minutes to elevate that heart rate. And it's also phenomenal to do that if we look at somebody like a bigger individual who we don't want necessarily to pound their joints by running continuously. So yeah, I was a big fan of those.
100%.
Also, piggybacking off that point, Ben, is modality. It's true, it doesn't matter just as long as you get it in. But, if you don't have to run, then, choose something low impact, because when you run, whether you know it or not, there's vertical displacement, which means that every time your foot hits the pavement, there is what's called in the business an eccentric contraction, meaning you have to slow your body down. That creates muscle damage, and that can interfere with your recovery between lifting sessions. So, low impact is preferred if you don't have to do like a run test or something like that.
Yeah, especially if we start to look at an individual who didn't have great mechanics, and now maybe they're overstriding with that heel strike, and then really causing a lot of issues with those lower extremities.
Yeah. And Andy, do you want to get into the weeds a little bit? Obviously, you being a large human being, talking about your conditioning kind of options that you choose from that are your go-to, especially
Yeah. So before I was, huge vanilla gorilla, I actually used to be a runner and a cyclist. And now that I'm trying to improve strength and maintain size and do the cardio thing. You already touched on it, Jimmy, but I really like, for instance, doing the Echo Bike. You get on the Echo Bike, you go 1/2 mile, you get on the treadmill, you set it at a 4-degree incline at 4 miles an hour. 1/2 mile is going to take you about a minute and a half. Minute and a half on the treadmill is going to be a 3-minute round. You can do 10 3-minute rounds and it feels like nothing, because anybody can do a 1/2 mile. It's not that big of a deal, and anybody can walk on a treadmill. It's a really easy way to pass the time. Something else you can do is I incorporate like a ton of machines. So I'll do like 500 meters on the rower, a 1/2 mile or a mile on the bike, 500 meters on the ski erg, go on the Jacob's ladder for 100 units, and VersaClimber for 100 units, and I'll just do like 2 rounds of that, and you're set. You got your cardio in for the day. Again, it keeps the mind active, and you're not thinking about it. But yeah, anything creative with low impact is going to be huge. Same with you, Jimmy. As you know, incline walking is probably the easiest. Elliptical, I know, don't let any of your manly friends or macho friends see you doing it for big guys. Elliptical is going to be your friend. By far, it's a weight-bearing exercise that is super easy on your joints. So I advocate for that. Yeah, those are the ones off the top of my head.
Nice. Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, I like what you said there, Andy, because as somebody with extreme ADD, a lot of times it can be difficult when I sit there and just try to do something for so long, because it's oh my God, I still have this long. Once I hit the halfway mark, then I'm like, oh, hell yeah, we're all the way home, because now I'm counting down minutes, I'm counting up minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a phenomenal way to do it when we just, if we're looking at 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, keeps us occupied. Yeah, I think it's phenomenal to mix it up that way.
Yeah, something else to consider too for big guys who don't like cardio, and anybody who doesn't like cardio, is pick a machine that's self-propelled. So you have your engine-free treadmills, your free treadmills. You have like a bike. You have a VersaClimber. You have a Jacob's ladder. All that, you as the elliptical, you as the person who's exercising has to control the intensity. Versus, say, like a treadmill or a stair stepper, you just put that stair stepper on level 5 and off you go. Because if you hate it, you're going to slow down, right? But if you have the machine setting the pace for you, then all you got to do is, keep up. And that's an easy mental hurdle or mental strategy to get you in the game.
And just to piggyback off that, I 100% agree. But one thing I want to just kind of hit home that I can't stand, it's just a pet peeve of mine. Yes, it's a treadmill. Yes, it's a stair stepper that's cyclical and going for you. But don't hang all of your body weight on the handles when you're doing cardio. I lose my mind. Same way in college strength and conditioning. If any of my student athletes are here, I told this story to Andy the other day. The thing that would have me lose my mind in college athletics is when I would call out an athlete and they would do the palms up like it wasn't me. I'm telling you, I went 0 to 60 real quick. Same thing with cardio equipment. Don't just hang your body on the cardio equipment. Don't turn on the fan on the car. If your cardio machine has a fan, don't turn it on. Like the whole there's too many comforts in the world. Like, heated steering wheel. We have climate controlled everything.
Don't forget barbell warmers. Barbell
warmers is another thing. If you're a garage lifter, do not get a barbell warmer. Just figure it out. But yeah, I can't stand that. Like, you go to a public gym and people are putting 50% of their weight on the treadmill or on a stair stepper. Yes, they're getting their heart rate up. I get it. I just think from like a mental standpoint,
yeah,
we need to do physically hard things, and you're just taking a physically hard thing and just nerfing it. You're softening it. So just figure it out and just suck it up in that half hour and don't touch the piece of cardio equipment unless you're hitting the speed or the incline faster. That's my thoughts. That's what I want to get out.
Well, and I think you talk about that, and I'm sure we've all said this to our athletes before. Control your body. So if you have to lean over, you're not in control of your body there. So if we're going to do a movement, be in control of your body throughout. Like, have the pride to do it. I'm 100% with you. I hate when our overweight football guys, like, we'd have to get them early there to, if they weren't making weight, they had to get there early to do cardio. And when they would try to lean all over, it's like, dude, this is why you're at where you're at. Like,
Yes.
I'm trying not to cuss
As
here, but
somebody
like,
who
dude,
lives
get your ass up.
As somebody who lives north of 300 most of his life, I disagree with everything both of you guys said. So just want to put that on the record.
I think if you have a certain total, I think it negates that because
Yeah, that's right. If your total's like more than like 1,600, you can lay on any machine you want.
you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want.
But yeah, I'm interested to hear Jordan's take on it with his 1950 total or something like that.
But to that point, like you look at Westside, like old videos of Westside powerlifters, like they still do GPP work, which is conditioning. They're still dragging sleds. One quick story, I forget. Back when I was in college athletics, I traveled with the team to Ohio. I reached out to Louis Simmons. Anyway, make a long story short, he was unbelievable. He took me in just for the day, put me through a workout, showed me all of his new equipment, he had me doing banded power cleans and all sorts of crazy stuff. Then one of the things he did, he brought me outside and just put me through a circuit with a wheelbarrow, like I forget what they called it, but basically a plate-loaded wheelbarrow. And he just had me doing walks with heavy weight, but just continuous movement. And that just shows you it's very low impact and it's like meathead conditioning. So even power lifters that squat a hell of a lot more than I ever will, still can manage to do something where they're not leaning on a cardio machine.
Yeah.
But yes, to Andy's point, if you squat a grand or you have a certain total, you can disregard the you can lay on the treadmill maybe. Yeah.
And if you want to get into the weeds on that for the meatheads out there, when you do zone 2 cardio, what that's going to do is increase your stroke volume of your heart. Your stroke volume is basically the amount of blood that gets pumped out with each beat. So when you have a weak heart, there's about 50% of the blood left over. You got a strong heart with a strong stroke volume, all that blood's coming out, which means your heart rate doesn't have to work as hard to deliver oxygen. Also your capillary densities is going to improve. That's those little blood vessels that is the actual gateway from the bloodstream into your muscles. That's going to improve with the working muscles. So those two things combined of increased stroke volume and increased capillary density is what's going to help you recover between sets. And if you can recover between sets, you can do more sets. And you do more sets, then strength goes up faster. So
100%. I agree. Good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is big to break down that stroke volume right there because a lot of people don't understand that because when we have working muscles, we do have to get blood there, obviously. That's why our heart rate elevates. But if we can pump blood there in less strokes, the better off we are in that training session. And to Jimmy's point earlier, longevity in life. If I look at my sleep metrics and it shows my resting heart rate at 61, that's not great. So yeah, I mean, the less strokes I can get to pump the blood to my body that I need, the better off we're at. So to transition a little bit there, where do we think like we said on the way or beginning of this, debunking that myth that cardio kills gains? Where do we think that truly comes from in this bro science world?
Andy, you want to start that one?
Yeah, so I did a little digging on this one, and it seems true to kind of what I heard. And basically, back in the 80s, as bodybuilders were trying to figure out a way to lean out and cut before contests, they didn't quite know how to do it and still maximize their hypertrophy gains. And there was a study done by this dude named Hickson, and he basically looked at a high frequency cardio where guys were doing like 6 days per week at like 70 to 90% of their VO2 max, and they were doing it for 40 plus minutes. So we're talking like, 240 to 300 minutes of training that's above zone 2. And yeah, at that level and that intensity, surprise, surprise, they concluded that hypertrophy doesn't occur. In fact, you lose muscle, right? Because your body is eating your muscle just to hang on. And that's when I think it all got started where bodybuilders were like, bump this, man. We're just going to do something else and we're just going to disregard cardio, and the pendulum swung all the complete opposite way in the 90s until you got what Jimmy said with like Louis Simmons, where they started to realize, oh no, we've swung the opposite way of no cardio. We got to find this happy medium of doing a little bit of general physical preparation while still keeping the strength gain and the hypertrophy focus front and center. So,
And how much do you think is the diet comes into that? Because you talked about bodybuilders needing to cut weight. Obviously, when bodybuilders are doing that, they're going to very low number of carbohydrates, which obviously, as we know, is going to we're not going to rebuild the muscle as we would if we were getting the carbs that we need. So how much do you think that myth comes from people just being a caloric deficit, and that's what's causing them to lose weight as well?
Yeah, caloric deficit and nutrient timing of doing fasted cardio in the morning. So that's always been popular in bodybuilding circles. That I think that plays a huge part of it. Is it's not so much the cardio. Yes, if you have high frequency, high intensity, high minute, it's going to interfere with your strength gains. But it's also the fact of, man, you just need to eat some carbs. You know, you need to get some carbs in your system if you want those strength gains and those muscle gains to stay. So,
Yeah. And I think it's also important to understand, like, so I didn't read that study, but what would you say percentage wise of the volume of the week was spent at above that threshold, like above 70 or 80%?
I think it was 100%.
So that goes against everything that we try to preach, right? Like
Right.
the 80-20 rule, like 80% of your weekly mileage or minutes should be at that zone 2 pace versus the other 20%, very small percent, should be those higher heart rates. So that study, that's completely the opposite. They went 100% high intensity and 0% low intensity. And Andy, do you want to speak on getting further in the weeds of like, as far as fueling sources for zone 2 versus those higher heart rates?
So personally, when you're in zone 2, your body is mostly pulling from your fat stores to fuel. Okay. It's always going to pull a little bit of glycogen, which is fueled by glucose. It's always going to pull from a little creatine, which is why you supplement creatine. But in zone 2, it's pulling mostly from fat. But I think more than the nutrient stores, I think also the timing of the cardio needs to come. If strength is the priority, even if it's not the priority, strength session needs to come first. Okay. Doing an hour of cardio and then immediately going into a strength session is a bad idea. You want the strength to come first, and ideally, you want the cardio session to be at like 8 hours apart. And then going into the nutrition piece, like Jimmy said, between the lifting session and the cardio session, pound those carbs, pound those carbs, pound those carbs, because that is what got depleted in the lift, and that's what you're going to need for your cardio.
Yeah, 100%. But again, the important thing to hammer home is that the majority of what you do, even if you have running goals, let's say you have whatever run time improvements you're trying to achieve, that still 80% of what you do should be that easy pace conditioning. Yes. And then that other 20% should be the higher heart rate. Right. So if you're not trying to improve run times and things like that, and you're just doing cardio for longevity, then you can just keep it all zone 2 and just go fat burning the entire time. But on the other side of it, don't expect to run fast if you're only doing zone 2. And that's, I think, an important point to hit as well. Like, base building is important. Base building meaning building out that zone 2 base of, hey, you're going from 0 minutes a week or 0 mileage, and you want to get to a certain mileage or minutes per week. You still want to build that base. But if you have to run a particular PT test or something like that, you're going to need some faster paced runs, or else you're going to go from zone 2 and you're going to shit the bed on that test because you haven't been running fast and you haven't been dealing with that higher heart rate.
Right.
Go ahead, Ben.
unfortunately, you see it all the time where people need to improve a, 2 mile, mile and a half, and they think, oh, I'm just going to up the mileage, and they continue to move slow.
Yeah.
And it's just like when we all worked athletics. For somebody to sprint faster, they had to get out there and move their body as fast as they can. So for me to run a mile and a half, 2 miles faster, I had to get out there and move my body faster than what I used to doing. If I continue to train slow, I'm going to be slow.
Yeah.
So just goes. Sorry, you go, Andy, and then I'll.
Going back to the 80-20 rule, again, using that 150 minutes as a quota that we want to be shooting for, and say that you are a guy who has a fitness test and you need to run your 2 mile, your 3 mile, your 5 mile, whatever. Okay, so 80% of 150 is 120, so you have 120 minutes or 2 hours that you need to spend in zone 2. So that's like 4 30-minute workouts, right? Okay, then you need another 30 minutes of zone 4, zone 5 work. So you could think about it like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm going to lift. Those are also the days I'm going to get my 30 minutes of zone 2 running. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to send it and do 30 minutes of really hard cardio. And you can take the weekend off. You're good.
Yeah. Because you should look at it the way I try to look at it. And I've talked about this before, is like, you have your weekly quota you got to hit. A lot of the people that train with us have busy schedules. And I know for the people that I program for, sometimes I may have like a 40 or 50 minute session. And let's say life gets in the way and they can only get 30 minutes in. We'll just break that up into 2 sessions as well. So like a 30-minute session and a 20-minute session, but hit your quota for the week. Don't just scratch it like, oh, I can't do it. Like, still figure out a way to make that time up. And, but I think that's important to know as well. Like, it's really, we talk about all the time, like, find a system and a structure that works for your situation. All of our situations are different. So is it maybe a 3-day? You can get all your conditioning in 3 days. That's absolutely fine. But if you have more days to break it up, especially as if your goal is an endurance event, it becomes a time thing. How are you going to balance the time? You're not going to fit 400 minutes of conditioning into 2 to 3 days of conditioning sessions. So you may have to break that up over 5 days, but just break it up. And so it's more palatable over time. So, it just comes down to goals.
So a couple questions for you guys as we talk about zone 2 a decent amount in this talk tonight. With your clients, obviously we look at zone 2, we're looking at heart rate, and it can range and that can vary. So with your clients, are you doing a test to figure out their true zone 2 heart rate, or are we going more off of that RPE? We mentioned the conversational pace earlier. How are you guys doing that with your clients? Because obviously online, we're not with them in person, so it's going to be hard to conduct a true max heart rate test to get those actual zones.
Yeah.
Correct. A couple different ways you can go about it. If you have heart rate monitors, that's easy. Then you could just tell them the exact percentages you want them to be at. There's also formulas, the Carbonin formula. I believe, I got to double check. I think we have it on School. If we don't, we could post it to School as well. I like the Carbonin formula because it takes it's basically your your estimated max heart rate, and then it takes in your resting heart rate into the equation. And then that gives a better depiction of what your zones look like compared to just 220 minus your age and then multiplying it by whatever percentage you're trying to be at. I like the Carbonin a little bit better. And then the other way is just giving them verbal cues, or like giving cues in the notes on Train Heroic of nose breathing only pace or conversational pace. So nose breathing only, if you can sustain nose breathing only while you run or hop on a bike or treadmill walk, that usually means you're probably at that zone 2 pace. Versus once you can't nose breathe, that means you need more oxygen. You're probably getting up higher in heart rate because of the pace that you're at. So then you can slow it down. So that's an easy way if you don't have a heart rate monitor. The wrist watches like Garmin's and things like that, all those things are great, but the chest strap is better. The closer to the heart, it's going to obviously give you a more accurate depiction of what the heart rate is. Yeah. So the ones I like, Garmin, obviously, Polar, is another one. And then feel free, Andy, if you have other ones.
Yeah, they're going to say something. The Garmin and the Polar H10 are your go-tos. You can also do a Polar H9, but Polar H10, just spend a little extra money and get the best. The wristwatches, all you people out there are listening who are just like, I do my chest strap and my wristwatch, and they're always like exactly the same. Yes, but the chest strap is still going to be more accurate because it's measuring the electricity in your heart that causes the beat. Okay, on your wrist, what it's doing is it's just sending light waves down and trying to track how many red blood cells are flowing through a blood vessel, and then it's estimating the heart rate off of that. So chest strap is the way to go. Going back to Ben's question of what I do with clients, I have done max heart rate tests with guys before. But another easy hack that I do is, for guys who have running goals, it's usually in the context of a fitness test, is we just run that fitness test and I tell them to run as hard as they possibly can. And then I just tell them to send me the data off their Garmin. It's like, okay, that's going to be your new max heart rate. And the other thing to keep in mind is, okay, let's assume you do get an accurate max heart rate and you use the component formula, which is superior to the 220 minus your age, and they have their heart rate zones, and they run, and all of a sudden they go out, and their legs feel like lead, and their heart rate is in zone 2. Like, there's an art to all this. You still need to trust your instincts and be like, okay, today I'm obviously overtrained. I know what a zone 2 should feel like. This does not feel like a zone 2. I don't care what my watch says. My legs are heavy and I'm beat. Cool. Walk your way home. Live to fight another day.
And that's also why I like heart rate over. Well, you could look at both things, like pacing and heart. There's always going to be a flaw in everything. Like weather is going to play a role in it. Obviously, 100% humidity, 90 degrees out. You could be in zone 2 just walking outside. So the heart rate could get thrown off. And the same thing with pacing. If you go by pacing, your pacing is going to get thrown off. But I do like heart rate training. So yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Same thing. And easy on the caffeine, guys. Like don't ingest a gram of caffeine and expect your heart rate zones to be accurate.
Yeah. Just pound a Ghost before starting to run. I wonder why you're at 160,
I just
30 seconds in.
I dumped some pre-workout in my rain. Like, yeah. You're going to get the zone 2, like just sitting there.
And to that point, if we have some listeners out there that are a little younger, I've seen it, especially in college, like athletes taking pre-workout before a run. Don't do that. Do not take pre-workout, like Andy said, like no caffeine. Like, don't take pre-workout before you run. Take it before a lift, not a run. Like it goes without saying, but it will come up on you. So,
yeah, and one thing to go back to a second ago, you talked about the weather. People try to act like it's not a factor, but as we get into these hotter months right now, it is 100% going to play a factor in your heart rate and then RPE, rate of perceived exertion, when we go into these workouts. So your zone 2, the intensity is not going to be there as it would on a nice 52-degree day with very little humidity. So make sure we are paying attention to those factors as well. I remember in fall camp years ago, a guy I was working for told me to get the players to not let the weather affect their RPE of practice because he wanted to make sure his practice notes were correct. I was like, I can't really do that because it 100% plays a factor into it. Like, it doesn't mean like what you had programmed was necessarily, or what you had scheduled for fall practice was necessarily that grueling. But yes, the weather in Alabama in August is going to play a factor in how practice is perceived.
100%. But it goes back to the me losing my mind before about like climate controlled everything. If you have a marathon coming up, you shouldn't, and it's the summertime, but you do all of your training indoors in this climate controlled environment, you have to get outside because it's going to be a big shock to your system. Your pace is going to be all off if you don't train in the situation that you're going to be like the famous quote, like train like you fight, I think that's important as well.
Yeah. And I believe Andy was it last week me and you talked about it, where like you had to train for the event that you were going for, so don't just get, or was this conversation I had with somebody else? If you're doing a running event, don't just swim in the pool. But if you don't have any specific event, swimming in the pool is perfectly fine. It'd be the same thing
I think
to
it
there.
was like the difference was like you can't cram for the test. So if you're somebody in the Army, you just can't do a sprint drag carry event over and over and over and over again and expect to get better. Yet you do have to do some other training modality to get better at that event. On the other hand, doing this specific event is the quickest and dirtiest way of improving it. So if I have 2 weeks left to improve the 2 mile, you better believe you're going to go out there and be running 2 miles every other day. But if I have 6 months, okay, there comes a point where doing the exact thing you're training for, your progress is going to quickly stall, and then it's going to go backwards. And this is specifically why in any training program worth its salt, it's going to be general in the beginning, and then as you get closer to showtime of your competition, your performance, your deployment, that's when you're going to get more specific.
Yeah, 100% agree.
And to slightly go back, Jimmy, to your point with weather conditions and everything else, it'd be the same way with football when like we knew we were playing at this time in September 2nd or whatever. We would go out and have our scrimmages at 6 p.m. on a Saturday evening to get ready for those actual conditions.
Right.
Because, Andy, I forget off the top of my head, what is the acclimatization for heat? What is that again? You know the time frame?
Yeah, I mean, the NCAA changes it, but last I heard, it was something like the first 10 days, or the first 7 days, they could be in helmets. The latter 5, they had to start off no helmets for 2 days, then helmets for 5 days, then they could go shoulder pads and they could go full pads. But it was a good week and a half at least of just getting used to that heat. Ben, you probably know more about this too. You've probably been in a training camp sooner than I have.
I don't remember 5. I remember 3 is what's sticking out to me with the helmets.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 with the helmets, and then you put on the pads, and then you put on full pads later on, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's been since 2019 where I was dealing with that, so it's been a minute. So I'm sure it's changed.
Yeah.
And on the same thing with acclimatization, and I think it's important for conditioning as well for people to understand, is if let's say you're on a conditioning training program and you have a few weeks setback, let's say 3 to 4 weeks setback, don't automatically jump back into your previous volume that you were at. That's an important thing because, again, everybody's done it who's probably listening to this, just ramping up volume, whether you're police, fire, military, doesn't matter, EMS, where you've had to do something out of nowhere, a PT test or something, and your volume spikes really high. You get through it, but then you probably are beat down for the next week or two. Well, same thing goes for when you can control those controllables, is to ease yourself back into that volume. I forget, the NSCA put out the document of basically progression back. It's what I should know this.
I actually know this one. So it's a month tapering period where you can finally get back to where you were. So you basically take your hardest conditioning session or hardest physical session, and the first week you can only do 50% of that.
Yes,
that means 50% of the lifting volume. That means 50% of the running volume and intensity. Next week it's 75. Next week it's 80, then 90, and then you got the green light to do whatever you want. But it's a pretty slow tapering period.
And that's important for people, even though there's probably a lot of people listening to this that aren't playing college athletics or things like that. But you should learn from those things, because even with Division 1, 2, 3 athletes, they're still doing a progression back. Even if your starting quarterback has been out for X amount of time, you're not going to throw him right in with the team at the same volume and intensity, because they're either going to get hurt, they're going to overtrain, something's going to happen. So if you're just the average gym goer, you should probably take notes on that and just gradually ease back into training. I know everybody wants to jump back on the horse of, oh, I missed a couple weeks because of X, Y, and Z, but make sure you slowly progress back into it. And that's the same thing. It goes for work to rest ratios as well. So I think it's like 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 work to rest to start. So if you work for 15 seconds, you have to rest 45 seconds or a minute. I don't remember exactly, and we can share some of that. But and then each week you can cut down that work to rest. So let's say it's 1 to 4 week 1 or 1 to 3 week 1. So that's 15 seconds of work, 45 seconds rest. That's 1 to 3. Then the following week would be 1 to 2, let's say. So that would be 15 seconds of work, 30 seconds of rest, and then eventually progressing to whatever you want, whatever the goal is there. But the biggest thing to understand is just that there's a slow progression over a month-long period, because the only time I've seen athletes have issues is usually during that transition. That's what it's called, a transition period, from a time where they're either coming off a long period of time that's not supervised by you, the strength and conditioning coach, usually off summer break or winter break. That's usually the time where athletes will overtrain, get hurt, things like that. So you want to be smart about that progression back to normal training. So, yep. What else you got, Ben? You're muted. There we go.
Yep, sorry, I had a cough coming on, so I wanted to mute myself real fast. Didn't want that going into the mic. No, I think it's all great stuff, talking about getting it back into it and honestly doing it the right way, because we've all seen in our careers, people do it the wrong way and they end up just, their whole career just, taking one step forward to then take 2 steps back. And then they're all frustrated. And now they really just don't know what to do when they're just not being patient with it. So yeah, extremely important to be able to be disciplined in our training to do that. And to the point earlier where we see a lot of regression is when people don't listen to their bodies. Like, trust what your body's telling you. And I know one of the things I took from you a little while back, Jimmy, is really paying attention to that resting heart rate each night. When that's honestly one of the first things I check each morning is, what's my resting heart rate at? I think I told both of you earlier when we were offline, like, I don't feel great today. You know what I noticed when I looked at my metrics last night sleeping? My resting heart rate was up. So I knew today was going to be a struggle. And so, like, making sure we're listening to the body. So my training session today, ease back a little bit on it. Probably should ease back a little bit more. But, pay attention to your body so that way we can, truly make progress.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing with technology. I know we've talked about technology in a negative sense, but it kind of goes back to like the comfortability. Like, people lean on sometimes like taking a day off and just doing things a little bit easier, but there's merit to listening to your body. So using how you feel and then confirming it with an elevated heart rate, then like, because sometimes you feel great, but your elevated heart rate, like, no, if you feel good, just go. But it confirms, like, to your point, Ben, you weren't feeling good, and then you looked at your resting heart rate and it was elevated. There's usually a sign of stress, fatigue, sickness. If you had a couple drinks the night before, that will 100% elevate your resting heart rate. And it's amazing that the monitor catches that a lot of times. So, or pretty much all the time.
Well, yeah. I think with technology, people get too reliant on it. It's not everything, but it is a tool that can help you succeed if used correctly.
Cool. 100%. But again, at the end of the day, like, if you have a race or something important that you've been training for, I would just not even wear it the night before. I'm sure, Andy, you would disagree. But I wouldn't even try to get in your own head. Like, you're just going to go out there. You've been training X amount of time for this particular event. Don't overthink it. Don't let your watch tell you something before you go out on that race, that competition. Don't look at it and just send it and perform. Because at the end of the day, you think right now, just because we're in the NBA playoffs, you think anybody in the NBA playoffs right now is perfectly recovered? Probably not. But guess what? They're still going to play if they have the ability. If they're not injured, they're going to play no matter what their recovery score is on their wrist. So.
Yeah, because you imagine I'm drawing a blank on the technology, what the company was that first started doing with football when they first started measuring heart rate variability, and then they would pull kids from practice. Could you imagine somebody be like, "Oh, your heart rate variability's off. You're not playing tonight."
For
Yeah.
NBA players,
Like, no, you wouldn't do it.
Could imagine that. For NBA players, I could imagine that. But
I think more so track athletes.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
where they have to have every single, not every one of them, but there is the stereotype that everything has to be perfect for track athletes.
So with the wearables for my former athletes, I used to get with the company and have them give me the ability to hide certain metrics from the guys, like the day before the game, because I still wanted their sleep, but I don't want them looking at their HRV, their readiness scores, for exactly the reason Jimmy said, like, gosh, it's such a bad idea. Just, trust your judgment, trust your own judgment, feel, and just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like sharing it with the athletes, you have to be smart. So whenever we'd use Catapult GPS, like if I had a guy coming back from an injury who was trying to gain the confidence back, and I could see on the GPS that he was actually getting faster, he's using, if he had rolled his left ankle, that he was getting more explosive cuts off his left ankle. That is 100% of the time that I would use that technology to show him that the numbers are actually proving that he's getting stronger on that ankle and getting back to full health. If it was trending the opposite direction, I probably wouldn't seek him out to go show him that, but I'm also not going to lie to the kid.
Right.
Yeah. And going back to the recovery piece too, a lot of times I'll see with athletes, if they have a particular race or some event that they've trained for, understand there's going to be residual effects after that as well. So if you think you can go out and run a marathon or do whatever endurance event and then immediately get back right into training, you are misled, because you'll notice if anybody out there has done a marathon and then tried to run like a normal easy pace run the next day, your heart rate is going to be way off. Your pacing is going to be way off, because your heart rate is going to be a lot higher because you're still recovering from that stimulus, that race or whatever it is. So just be smart about that. So really, to sum it up, like, be smart if you're coming off a long break and getting back into training, and then be smart about, I know a lot of people after they do that event, they want to get back into the next routine because they're probably training for something else after that. But you got to give your body time to adapt and recover. And that's really important as well. So, yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. I know we got down a little bit more of a rabbit hole. I think we all kind of expected that, then getting away from the cardio. Is it actually killing your gains? Which we know it's not. So with that, let's loop it back into there as we close out. Andy, like I told you last week, really enjoying your closeout. So what comments do you have for us to close out this week?
Oh man, the pressure's on. I don't know if I have anything really profound or pithy or clever to say, other than the fact of for those people who are skeptical about cardio affecting their gains, just start walking on a treadmill 3 times a week. And as long as your sleep and nutrition is on point and you're hydrating, like just give it a shot. And if your strength numbers plummet, it's probably because those other factors are off center. So that's all I got.
Yes, absolutely. Jimmy, got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just like, again, most of the people, it's, if you got into lifting, like you enjoy lifting, you don't enjoy the conditioning as much. To Andy's point earlier about throwing on a weighted vest to do yard work, things that have to get done anyway. If you're going to push, if you have a family and you got young kids and you're pushing them in a stroller, throw a weighted vest on and go for a walk. Like, you're going to do it anyway, so you might as well get a workout out of it. I have to mow my lawn, so I might as well get something else out of it besides an hour or two of mowing my lawn and picking up dog crap. I might as well get my heart rate up. And So you might as well. And then the other thing is, get outside. Like Michael Easter, he talks about it. It's a great book, Comfort Crisis. Basically talks about a lot of that stuff of getting outside, doing uncomfortable things and things like that. So just get outside, go for a weighted vest walk, go for a walk, get your body moving. And yeah, so that would be that one. And again, going back to my comment before about like hanging on to treadmills, if you guys were to take anything out of this, just don't lean on treadmills. Like, get uncomfortable. Don't live in a world of like everything is so comfortable for us. Like just go through the pain cave and figure it out. That's all I got.
No, absolutely appreciate that, guys. Appreciate you guys being on with us tonight. Also, if you're interested in training further with the MAST team and any of our coaches, take the athlete assessment in the link below, and we'll be on here next week. See you guys soon.
Awesome, guys. Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Awesome. Have a good one.